let's take it step by step. So the start,
Okay. Yeah.
I've been in a situation where we said, right, we're going out at, admittedly, I would say that this
Yeah.
watts per kilo,
Yeah.
and this person's going to take the front, but inevitably, I'd say year to date, eight out of 10 times we've managed to drop someone
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
too early,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
know, I'll come on to that a bit, but I know also, you say that we should be prepared to drop riders at some point, but
Yeah.
how should we be tackling the start of a team time trial?
Well, I can only tell you the way I've done it, and I've been doing it now for 8 or 9 months fairly regularly, and that's um, have heard rumor. I've never seen it in action. I'd love to know if anybody does it. Maybe somebody can comment. But I've heard this idea of obviously everybody knows about going into the pairing screen. You've
Yep.
got your 5 minute delay or
Yep.
whatever it is, and I've heard rumor of teams all sitting in the pairing screen, all 6 of you or 8 of you on a Thursday, and then when somebody says our time has come, our start
Yep.
delay is finished, everybody is in the pairing screen doing 1 billion watts, and
Yes.
you come out of the pairing screen
Flying.
simultaneously and all fly off a line.
Yeah, it's actually, I talked about it in a previous video. It only really works well on a PC because you use the A
Yeah.
to get yourself into the pairing screen,
Yeah.
and then press escape, and you will launch. The problem with that is you need everyone doing it, and
Yeah.
I've not been in a team yet, because even on a PC, if you go into the menu and then into the pairing screen, when you press
Yeah.
escape, it doesn't take you directly into the pen. It takes you back
Yeah.
into the screen you were before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well, I'm working with some of the Premier League teams, and I can tell you that we're not doing that. We're not brave enough to
Great.
try it, because somebody will get left behind. Somebody will press
Yeah.
the wrong button. Somebody might even accidentally exit the game entirely. We actually end up most of the time. I had a team member who didn't even want to use the pairing screen because she wasn't sure it was going to work okay, and she had power pedals, so she didn't really want to spin backwards in case. So she was running up and down the stairs to warm up whilst on Discord, and then just jumped on a bike. So I favour sending everybody out at a known wattage, and what you could do is use the position 2 wattage of
Okay.
the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
because it'd be just below threshold, and everybody's just below threshold will be slightly different, give or take 20 watts. I tend to focus on that because starts are usually on the flat, so you haven't got to worry about hills and things. So my suggestion is go out at a known wattage from the sheet or thereabouts, and make sure you've got everybody before you hit your first turn.
All right. That's
And
I think that's sound advice.
I don't think it's always necessarily the absolute fastest, but the chances are you'll waste more time trying to corral back people you dropped if you go flying out than if you actually went out a little bit more relaxed.
A bit more conservative, relaxed, and
Yeah.
then I guess you're not having to slow down as a group then to wait as well.
No, you build into it.
All right, so we're in the team time trial. We're going, and I have to talk to you about changes because I think we've had this discussion in the past. But I, in the past, have used the sort of the sync sprint technique.
Yeah.
I personally, I think I'm reasonably good at it, I will
Yeah.
say. But I've been in teams where I'm having to shout because they're not coming off the wattage enough, and it is a difficult one to master. So how do you, as the Zwift-DS, recommend to do changes?
Well, when I'm DSing a team and I've got that spreadsheet in front of me, I'm not only telling the front rider how much power, they know their numbers, but I'm reminding them constantly of how long and how much to do a number for, and reminding the second person what they should be doing, and possibly even the third person. I'll let 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 take care of themselves. But about 5 or 10 seconds before the swap over, it's thanks, Deborah, you're done, you can drop off. And I've tried sync and sprint. My slight issue with it is that you're asking somebody to go really hard, then back off completely, and then potentially go really hard again and jump on the back. And if you happen to hit even like a 2% incline, or then I think it's a bit fraught with danger. You've got to, as a group, you've got to really learn it and practice it. If you can't learn it and practice it as a group, then I favour instead a kind of what I call a gentle drift to the back. But that does mean, as you say, coming off the power. And by that, I'm talking 40% of race threshold. So if you're doing 250 watts on the front, literally 120 watts.
Yeah, yeah.
Let the group go past you, and then you build back up to your position 8 power, which is probably only going to be about 180 watts anyway.
Yes.
So it's much more calm and relaxed, and that should allow the group to pass through you still.
Yeah.
Rather than rolling and then jumping. Just feels to me a little bit staccato.
No, I think you're right, but I guess in my experience as well is that some riders still don't come off enough, to even have that drift. I would agree based on experience. So I think the other benefit is not just knowing your threshold numbers or your the numbers you should be doing on the front of the TT, but it's also understanding of what I can get away with a rider in position 8, for example, because a lot of people just don't realise how easy they can go from position 5 backwards.
Yeah.
And again, that was another, not just that front end from your spreadsheet, but actually further down, it's an eye opener for a lot of people to say how little you could get away with doing. And actually that transitions into scratch races as well. As we're talking today, last night was the points race around Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
And all the best Zwifters, Zwift racers, are the guys that absolutely understand when they're on the back how little they can get away with to recover for that next, sprint or whatever it might be. So, transition. That I think that particular part transitions over well to the points races as well as the team time trial.
Yeah, it does definitely.
So you mentioned there hills and so on. So what about hills? Do we stay in a pace line or do we blob up on whether it's rolling sections or hills?
Yeah. I think this is where more than anything team knowledge of each other is important, because when it goes uphill, it can be a little bit of every man all man for themselves. Over about 3 or 4%, my personal view is then watts per kilo, regardless of weight and height, becomes much more important. And it might be that if you're going up hilly KOM 7-8% for a couple of minutes, I would look at the spreadsheet and say, right, what could we all do as a watts per kilo that means that none of us are, really blowing?
Yeah.
That's controlled. Maybe if it's hilly KOM, it's like a 3-lap course. You might go, right, well, let's go for 4 watts per kilo when everybody's threshold is 4.2-ish, And on lap 2, we go, right, we're going to go 4.5 now. And lap 3, it's best effort. And undulations, like the S's in Watopia, is an absolute nightmare for this. If somebody comes off a hard turn, and you hit the S's and they hit an upslope, they're in trouble a lot of the time. Again, I would say maybe it's a watts per kilo number and a blob, or as I said at the start, you revert to your position 2 power, because you've got some ups and downs. So your position 2 power versus everybody else's position 2 power should keep you together reasonably well. And because trying to do a pace line, I think, is tricky, and you're not going to lose much time. We know that the difference between a pace line and a blob is not that much in the grand scheme of things, unless those intervals are really high. So for that 30 seconds that you're doing the undulations, just blob up.
Yeah.
Don't try and get one person to lead all the way up, is my view. Okay,
so that does lead me on to another question then of drop riders. Well, two. I guess that relates to 2 things. Is it worth having a rider in there just to draft behind? Is the first one, and then also, or do we be prepared to drop riders?
Yes and yes. So I think any more than 2 seconds off the back of the group, then you've got to make a very quick decision. And that's where a DS who's impartial can make the call.
Yeah.
Because groups, it depends on what your priorities are. Maybe as a group, you just want to have a good workout and all finish together. Nothing wrong with that at all. And lots of people do. if you want to be competitive, then you've got to be quite ruthless. And I would say, like I said, if they're more than a couple of seconds off the back, somebody has to make a call very quickly. And a lot of the time when teams are self-managing, there'll be are we waiting? Do we go? What are we doing? And a DS has to go, can you get on? Or is the team proficient enough to spread themselves out, which always looks great on the coverage, spread themselves out and pull a rider back in?
Yeah.
If you can, without dropping too much momentum, or that rider's important, maybe they've had a small issue, but they're important because they're going to drag you on, they're going to do big turns later or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But if you're pushing for a best result, the waiting is very quickly counterproductive. And I'll give you some numbers as to why. Based on all the math that I've done, it was included in the time predictor. It was in my second video. Roughly speaking, if you compare 4 riders to 8 riders, or especially 4 riders to 6 riders, in an hour-long Zwift team time trial, if all things were equal, other than team size, the 4-person team would probably only lose about 40 seconds over a 6-person team for the hour.
Wow.
Now, that sounds quite a lot in an hour. It is. But if you think that most Zwift team time trials are, let's say, 40 minutes-ish, 45, that 40 seconds now becomes 30 seconds. If you lose 1 rider rather than 2, then that now becomes 15 seconds during the course of the whole race by them not being there. If you lose a rider halfway round, what you're effectively saying is that you're going to end up 6 or 7 seconds slower than you would have done if that rider was still part of the team. So the question is, will you waste 6 or 7 seconds faffing about saying, are we waiting, slow down, soft pedal? Or are you just better off saying, we're going to crack on?
Yeah.
Because we've lost you, and actually, harsh but true, you're only worth 6 seconds in the second half of this 40-minute race.
Yeah, and I guess you're right. By the time you've actually slowed down and lost that momentum anyway, the chances are you're going to lose that time regardless, I guess.
Yeah. I posted that on a ZRL time trial actually, and it got a few responses. Yeah, it got a few responses. I don't believe it. All I can do is point to the maths and say, happily to be proved wrong, but this is what I see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What about then in terms of the turn of death? I mean, just that relates to what you were just saying there. Really, if I look at our team time trial teams in ZRL, we're Division 1, it may West B1, for example.
Yeah.
And some of those top teams, there's actually bigger gaps. Down that 20 teams, there's bigger gaps than 40 seconds between position 3 and 4, for example. But I do see some of those top teams are still finishing with 4 riders. Within rider 5 is 20 seconds behind, and so on.
Yeah.
And talking to some of those guys, they're getting riders to do the turn of death or whatever term
suicide pull.
Suicide pull. Is that something that you utilize within your teams, or?
Yeah, I have done, but actually I've done it more almost as a motivational thing. So, you've got through all of the worst bits. You're now you've come off the S's. You're going to finish on Ocean Boulevard. You're going to come down. You're going to go under the stone arch and down. Or another classic example is you've gone past the start-finish pens in the desert, and you're heading to the rock arch finish. It's perfectly flat, and the team's building and building by now. If they're all still together, the chances are they're pretty much going to stay together. And everybody's getting closer and closer to threshold, and we're getting closer and closer to not doing turns. We're getting closer and closer to a race between 4, 5, 6, 7 people. So what I tend to do is, by this point, I'm picking on my strongest riders, who usually have been strongest throughout, and asking them to go hard. But by now, we've probably crept the threshold rate up by 5, 10 watts to what was on the sheet, because it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
And just go, take us to a K to go, or take us to 500 meters to go, knowing full well that they're strong enough to do it, but then they are going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the way and almost it becomes part of the race. It's like a lead out for the team. And I'm doing it more because it's exciting and it really motivates everybody. When everybody's, in my ears, all I can hear is puffing and panting, and I'm going to die, and it's come on, and I forget all the turns, and I forget the numbers, and it just becomes motivational.
Yes.
And to me, the suicide pull is part of that big motivational finish.
Yeah, just getting your riders to go as deep as they can. That makes sense. And I think that's what the great teams do. They know that it's not about them as a rider and them being within that 4 that counts.
Yeah.
It's about playing their part to get the 4 to the finish that counts.
Yeah,
and actually, the guy who's put more effort, the guy or girl who's put more effort in to get those 4 to the finish, but not finishing the top 4 himself, I would doff my cap to more, and give more respect to than than some of the others maybe.
But I think there's a limit to that, and I think you have to pick your moment. I think it's the last few kilometers before that becomes a thing. I've done several team time trials on a Thursday where I'm watching the teams either side, and we're down. We're 10 seconds off the team that went before us and the team that went behind us. But I know it's one of the longer, it might be an hour-long team time trial. I'm keeping the group together, and I know everybody's doing numbers that they can do for an hour. And then it's fantastic in the second half of the race, watching that come down. And then you find out at the end that team in front blew up.
Yep.
That's how you do a good team time trial, in my view.
I have very bitter experience of that, I can tell you. Is the last race of last season, we were gunning for promotion. The Belgian BZR were well ahead, and it was myself and it was our team and Team NL, for example.
Right.
So we went off before them, I think. We went off after them, and we were gaining on them. And Karsten from Team NL, he has posted a video about this himself because I think it was a really proud moment. We were 15 seconds up on them, and we closed them down at halfway point. And in the end, they beat us by 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Because we just went out way too hard. Yes, we did have a technical and lost a rider, but as you've already highlighted, the impact of that was probably minimal by the time the point we had lost them. Yeah. So, hats off to those guys. So we've seen it work. Now, Paul, I know I've kept you for some time, but I have got a couple more questions I just want to run through. So, not everyone is fortunate enough to have a DS like yourselves. A lot of teams don't have a DS. They just have someone within the team making the calls, or they do it together. So those teams that are not fortunate enough to have someone like yourself, what would your sort of tips be?
There's probably a few, actually. The first one I think we've touched on is know your team. And by that, I mean, all know what each other can do. Don't just rock up and assume that everybody can do 4.5. What does that mean? Watts per kilo is too short-sighted. And you need to factor in the raw watt differences that those watts per kilo represent when you're on the flat. And use both numbers for your best result, kind of flip-flopping between the two, as we talked about on certain parts of the course. If you can, especially know your own numbers. You talked about the sheet underneath the screen. And know what you can get away with and what you should be doing within the context of the team. To contribute when you're doing a turn, and also not blowing up and tearing the team apart, and surging off the front. As an extension of the above, like you say, trust the draft. Trust that those numbers do work. It's quite scary, but you can get away with nearly half of what the person on the front is doing when you're right at the back. Know the course. So know when the inclines come in, know how long, the reverse, I think it's reverse hilly KOM looks long and scary, but it's actually only 400 meters of effort. And then there's a dip, and then there's a false flat all the way to the arch. I've done that course so many times now, I'm only worried about the first 400 meters of the hilly KOM. And you also know that if you go through the banner at the top of the reverse hilly KOM and head back down towards Ocean Boulevard, once you get round the left bend and start heading down, you can super tuck. But you could then go around a hairpin and it flattens out. But you'll then speed up and super tuck again. So I tell my team, just roll all the way and take your breather. And then probably the last thing is, and this is the tricky one as a group, is to make those calls early on, do we drop a ride or do we carry on?
Yeah.
And I think as long as everybody goes into it knowing the objective of the day and is happy that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you'll get a much better team time trial result.
Yeah. So on that note, you mentioned that. Are you still doing your? Because I used to use your DS notes.
Yes.
I know. A couple of my videos have had my own, but I tend to stick to the race notes for the points races because yours is so good historically. And I know you've typically done Thursday night, but are you still doing the race notes?
Yeah, I still do the Tuesday team time trials. I don't tend to do the scratch races because, as I said, that's much more about tactics in the moment.
Yeah. So how do our viewers access those race notes?
So on Zwift-DS top link, there's a top nav for race notes, and it's got all the WTRLs that I've done recently, and I just add in each one in. Usually do it Monday, Tuesday of the week of WTRL. I'll do the next ZRL as well, and I tend to focus on very succinct. At 10k for 400 meters, there'll be a 3% incline, blob up. S's come at 27.5k. Be ready. If somebody goes now, you should probably go without them. Just those kind of points.
Yeah.
And I put a bit of a preamble on it, but it's printable as a fairly standard kind of clean black and white sheet.
I guess you want, in the heat of the moment, you want something as simple and as straightforward as possible, I guess.
Yeah.
So, all right, fantastic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave, if you don't mind, Paul, I'm going to leave links to your videos your DS notes and the time predictor and also the spreadsheet. Because I know you've done a new version, this version 2, which I'm really thankful because I know you sent it to me a couple of weeks ago now. So I'm really thankful for that. So, guys, I'm going to leave all the links for these documents and Paul's website in the description below, so please check those out. Please also go and check out Paul Fitzpatrick on YouTube because there's some really useful videos. I was just reminded of that switchback descent that we get that back into downtown. I actually scratch raced the other day, and I remembered the video hearing you say to your riders, don't come out with a super tuck. And I did go for a nervous moment thinking, if I get dropped for the bunch here because I've stayed, but it stayed in and it was absolutely fine. So go and watch Paul's videos. Go and check out his website.
I've got one last suggestion for people. Download a Zwift workout that I've created that simulates a team time trial and try it, because you realise it's just how hard those top teams go on the front. But it's really hard to practice the team time trial when you're not doing a team time trial. So have a go at the ZWO workouts if you're on PC.
Paul, thank you very much for today. Been really useful and insightful. And I know it's a bit of a long video, but if you don't manage to make it all the way through the first time, come back and watch the rest of the video. So I've got some really useful information there.